Today we're going to talk about simplifying radicals. Since I'm gone, there are some specific steps that you need to do. Get on Schoology, look at the assignment titled Simplifying Radicals, watch the attached video, and fill out the examples and homework in this packet as you go. Make sure you're writing something on each and every slide. So if it's examples, you need to be writing down the examples and the work that goes with it. If it's homework problems, you need to make sure you're writing down the homework and the answers that go with it. When you get finished, you need to turn your packet in to the substitute. Today we're going to talk about radicals, and radicals are just square roots. It's just a fancy name for square roots. So if we simplify the radical, that means get the best answer that you can, or the simplest answer that you can. So we need to see, what's the square root of 9? Well, we all know the square root of 9 is 3. Technically, the square root of 9 is positive and negative 3, but today we're only going to focus on the principal square roots, or the positive square roots. On this bottom one, we have 2 times the square root of 25. Well, we all know square root of 25 is 5, because 5 times 5 is 25. So we're going to do 2 times 5. 2 times 5 is 10. When you have a number that isn't a square number, like 25 or 9, those are both square numbers because 3 times 3 gives you 9. You don't have any remainders or anything left over if you do the square root. It comes out to be a whole number. If you don't have a square number, then there is a way to get this into more simplified form, and that's what we're really focusing on today. So to start that out, what you're going to do is figure out what are some factors of 24. Remember that factors are numbers that go into 24. They multiply together to get a product of 24. So I know that 1 times 24 is 24. 2 times 12 is 24. 3 times 8 is 24. And 4 times 6 is 24. What we are going to be working with today is using the square numbers. So we are looking for factors that are square numbers. 1 is a square number, or a perfect square, that's also what they're called, because 1 times 1 is 1, but 24 isn't. So that's not going to help us out any. 2 and 12, neither one of those are perfect squares, and 3 or 8, neither of those are perfect squares. But we can use 4 times 6, because 4 is a square number, or a perfect square. So we're going to simplify, and instead of doing square root of 24, we're going to break this apart and do the square root of 4 times 6. Because 4 times 6 is the same thing as 24. So all we're doing is breaking this apart a little bit. We're not changing the value any, because still underneath here, 4 times 6 is 24. Now I'm going to break this apart even farther. So I'm going to break it apart into the square root of 4 times the square root of 6. If you can, you simplify. And this is why I wanted to use the one that had the 4 in it, because the square root of 4 is 2. 2 times 2 is 4. So I'm taking out the square root of 4. And I'm changing this part just to a 2. The only things that go into 6 would be 3 times 2. Well, 3 or 2, neither one are square numbers, so that's not going to simplify anything for us. So we're just going to leave that as times the square root of 6. So this is as simple as I can get the square root of 24. This is as simplified as it's going to get. 2 times the square root of 6. So we're just going to do this several times. Please make sure you're writing down the work to go with the examples as we go. So we want to think about what numbers go into 162. I know 2 must go into it because it's even, so let's try that. 162 divided by 2 would be 81. Well, 81 is a perfect square, so I'm going to go ahead and use this. If you came up with a different number, you can try that one also. I'm going to break this apart into 2 times the square root of 81. Then I'm going to do square root of 2 times square root of 81. I can't break square root of 2 down anymore because 2 is a prime number. Nothing goes into it. Nothing multiplies by itself. to give you 2. So I'm going to leave this as square root of 2. And then over here, square root of 81 is 9. So I'll change this to 9. So I have square root of 2 times 9. When we write this in simplest form, we always write the number that's not underneath the square root. We write that first. And then we can go ahead and put the square root of 2 after that. When they're written next to each other like this, it's kind of like a variable where you have 9 times the square root of 2. You don't actually have to write any multiplication signs or anything in between there. You can just leave it as 9 times the square root of 2. On this one over here, we have the square root of 400. So we need to figure out what numbers go into 400. We could do 2 because it's an even number, so 2 times 200. Or 4 times 100. Or 5 times 80. Those are some off the top of my head. So that's how you're going to come up with what numbers that you're going to put underneath the square root sign to break it down. You have to think about, what do I know that goes into that? So the first thing I always do, obviously, is I check to see if it's even, because that's what I did first on both of these. If it's even, I always try the 2 times whatever, because that's an easy one that we can usually do in our heads. So I'm going to actually choose 4 times 100 to use, because 4 and 100 are both square numbers, so I should be able to break this one down quite a ways. I'm going to do, instead of square root of 400, we're going to do square root of 4 times 100 underneath there. Then I break that on down, square root of 4 times square root of 100. Square root of 4 is 2. Square root of 100 is 10. So I get rid of my square root signs. They have totally disappeared. Now I'm going to simplify this because I can. 2 times 10 is 20. So the square root of 400 is just 20. Now maybe you already knew that, so you didn't have to do this method. And good for you. If you already knew square root of 400 was 20, then you could have just written down 20. Usually it doesn't work that way, though. So on this one we have square root of 75 and square root of 200. With the square root of 75, I want to think about what numbers do I know that go into 75? Well, it's not an even number, so 2 doesn't go into it. Then I think, does 3 go into 75? Yeah, 3 times 25 is 75. Does 4? No. Does 5? 5 times, it must because it ends in a 5, so 5 times 15? Yeah, 5 times 15, sorry. That's all I got off the top of my head, so I'm going to go ahead and use the 3 times 25. Why did I choose 3 times 25 instead of the 5 times 15 to use? Yep, 25 is a square number. So underneath here, I'm going to do 3 times 25 instead of 75. Break that apart into square root of 3 times square root of 25. Square root of 3, can't do it, so I just leave it as square root of 3. Square root of 25 is 5. 5 times 5 is 25. So this is as simple as I can get it, but I have to rewrite it with a 5 first, and then times the square root of 3. On the right-hand side, I have a 200. Well, last time when I was doing this, 100 worked out well for me. I could do 2 times 100. I could do 4, it's another square number, times 50. I could do 5 times 40. I could do 10 times 20. So I want to look at the one with the biggest square number. So I have several in there that I know I can break down farther. Actually, all of them could be used. You would just, some of them require more work. To get the one that has the least amount of work, you're looking for the biggest square number. So 4 is a square number and 100 is a square number. I'm going to go with 100 because it's a lot bigger than 4. That means I'll have less work to do later. So we're going to break apart 200 into 2 times 100. Even farther, square root of 2 times square root of 100. Square root of 2 I can't do, so I just leave that. Square root of 100 is 10. So I have to write this in my simplified form, 10 times the square root of 2.